Brats. That's what they called us. Brats. You know us. We're the ones that had the moving truck pull up in front of our house every 2 to 3 years. The ones who lived on or near post, base, or station all around the world. Those of us that had passports while we were still in diapers. So that was my growing up experience. My dad was career Navy, and our family traveled quite frequently with him. As a result of his service, we missed out on some of the opportunities that non-military families had. For example, we often couldn't get home to in-laws or grandparents to see cousins for the holidays. Sometimes we weren't even together for the holidays because my dad was overseas somewhere else. Also, we never had a cohesive education because every couple of years we were enrolling in a new school system that had new ideas of what should be taught in the different grades. But to make up for that, we had many other wonderful experiences. We had books in numerous languages. My favorite was the Portuguese interpretation of the Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. That wolf, he was mau. He was muito mau. He was total mau. We also had the opportunity to see many beautiful and fascinating places and meet really interesting and wonderful people. Also, as an unexpected bonus, my sister and I learned very early on how to play bridge so that we could fill in with the Navy wives' tables. And as a family, this worked out just fine for us. When I look back on these experiences, I remember a lot of joy and wonder. For example, one time we were flying from Dover Air Force Base to Ramstein after dark. And the pilots of this aircraft invited me and my sister to come up and ride along in the cockpit. The view looking out over Atlantic City after dark was absolutely amazing. Now, there were some experiences that weren't so wonderful. For example, there is this black eel with huge bulging eyes on it that swims off the deep waters of Portugal, and they haul that thing up and put it on your plate and expect that you're gonna eat it. But overall, I remember my childhood so fondly, and I never had to worry. I knew that we had enough. We had one another, we had all of our basic needs met, and we had so much enrichment, and there was plenty. In our home growing up, there was more than plenty. As a matter of fact, there was enough to share. So I remember when I was 6 years old, my sister Tina, she was 4, and my parents came home from a class that they had attended at the church. And they sat me and my sister down, and they explained to us how we were blessed to have so much, and how we were going to welcome a foster child into our home, because we had enough to share. And so presently, our first foster child came to the home, and her name was Susie, and she was a teenager. Suddenly, I was cast in the role of middle child, but I didn't mind. I loved it. Susie was grown, and she was exotic. She had this long dark hair, and she wore tight jeans, and she drank Tab. Everything I wanted to be when I grew up. And Susie was only the first. We had several more teenage girls that came to live with us, and every one of them left a little mark on our family. And some of those marks were really wonderful. It was while Susie was in our home that I broke my leg riding a bicycle, And my mom had a bunch of Japanese businessmen coming over for dinner that night, and my dad was still at work. So it was Susie that helped prepare, among other things, my mom's amazing lumpia, another benefit of travel. Susie helped to prepare the house and the food and get everything ready so that my mom could take me to get my leg set in a cast. But there were also some difficult times. These girls did not come to the foster program because everything was fabulous for their lives at home. I remember one of them had a habit of running away to try to go back to the father that really did not want her. And time again, she would be brought back to the home, disappointed, angry, dejected. Evidently, I heard my mom, not that long ago, tell a story about the night one of them OD'd in the house. I vaguely remember a night with running around and noise and lights on and shh, go back to sleep. But throughout all of this, my parents did a really great job of protecting the innocence of me and my sister while also sharing our home of plenty with these girls who desperately needed some of that family love that we had. And then we got another one. And this one was a boy. My sister was 6 and I was 8 the summer that Rob came to live with us. And of course, he was a completely different thing because he was much closer in age to me and my sister. And I don't remember feeling this absolute adoration for him the way I had felt with some of the girls. But he was tough and he was youthful, and somehow they just plopped him right in the middle of our family, and it was like he had been there all along. Now, he played tough, so we spent more time outside than me and my sister had ever before. That summer, our Barbies in the basement were completely forgotten about, and we ran around and played hide and seek and climbed trees, and we didn't have to be home until the lightning bugs started blinking off in the bushes. So we would fall into bed exhausted with our knees all cut up and every spare inch of skin completely bitten by bugs. And it was such a magical summer. And he picked on us and we picked on him right back. He lived during the school year at some sort of residential school, and then during the summer they would send him home to a family. So it was, I think, the first time that he'd had 2 little girls, and of course, being the former big sister, I had a little bit of attitude, so every little bit of crap he gave me, I'd turn around and give him right back. And I remember he had this girlfriend at school, and her name was Fonda. So I would go up to him and I would say, you know, I'm very fond of you. Yeah, that was as good as it gets when it's 8. So that summer with Rob, we went to a cottage up in Michigan that had been in my dad's family. And all the cousins and the aunts and uncles were there. And still, I mean, Rob was just part of the family and he fit right in perfectly. And although he'd never been to the cottage before, he was kind of able to figure out how things went. Of course, we arrive in the car, we pull up, and me and my sister are out of the doors and running down to the dock over the lake before the cars even really come to a complete stop. And we're standing over there and we're looking at the water and we can't wait to be in it. So we don't hear him creeping up behind us. And all of a sudden, there we are standing on the edge of the dock when he goes, and now there's 2 little girls knee-deep in the lake in front of the cottage. There's a place down the street from the cottage called Jim's that had ice cream, and we would go there several times a week to get ice cream. My favorite ice cream was pink bubblegum because it was like 2 treats in one, right? You eat the ice cream and then you have a mouthful of bubblegum. Kind of disgusting now that I think about it, but at 8 it was fantastic. Rob's favorite flavor was Superman, and this was disgusting. When you looked at it, it was very colorful, but the flavor was just revolting, and it was these swirls of blue and yellow and red all mixed into one. I actually tried some as an adult last summer, and it's still disgusting. So I'm going to save you that trouble from trying it. But anyway, this was one of the most memorable summer experiences of my life. The summer that I had a brother. And I don't really remember how the summer ended. I just know at some point Rob went back to his school and I went back to my school, and my sister started at my school, so that was kind of new. But just one day he wasn't there anymore. And it was only several years ago that I heard my mother telling someone else the story of what had happened. And as it turns out, he fit in so well with our family, and we had so much to give, that my parents had put in to adopt Rob and make it permanent. But unfortunately, back in those days, the county services didn't have a good way of keeping tabs on people if they happened to move away, which was a very real possibility when you were dealing with someone in the military. So they gave my dad the option of, well, if you want to quit, then we will reconsider your application. But my dad was committed, and in the end, he did serve a full 31-year term. So he did not quit, and Rob needed to go back to the school. And as I overheard my mom telling this story, she mentioned that it was the only time she'd seen my dad cry was in the car coming home after dropping Rob off. And as it turns out, they were right, because it was less than a year later that my family packed up and moved out to Monterey, California, where my parents were enrolled in the Defense Language Institute in preparation for my dad's next tour of duty in Lisbon, Portugal. And from then on, we would move many more times before my dad finally retired and me and my sister grew up and got out of the house. So they were right to think that they might have lost track of him. But they were so wrong. They were so wrong, because any child would have been lucky to have had the experiences that my family had. And even though we were a little bit nomadic, the core of what a family is, we took with us to every single one of those locations. I look back and I think, you know what? Any child would have been lucky to join us brats.